It's Thursday, which means it's Thursday for knowledge. Today, I got my MKP brother and author, Samuel Morgan, to come and talk to us about his new book, Postponement. We talked about attachment theory, we talked about being anxious, we talked about being avoidant, and we talked in detail about the cost of not opening up to ourselves, to relationships, to the pain of life, and the cost of opening up. We talked a lot about life, we talked a lot about the need for relationship, the need for connection. Take a listen, see what we've done, see if you like it, and if you do, as always, remember to subscribe. The man who chases two rabbits catches neither. Confucius. This week I've invited a friend of mine, MKP brother of mine, Samuel Morgan, to talk about his new book, Postponement, and the themes that are in it. So welcome, Samuel.
Hello.
Great to have you here. Thanks for making the time. I just wanted to I find that people are better at introducing themselves than I am at introducing them. So if you could just let us know a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, I'm almost 40, but in denial of it. This is my first book, but I have made attempts previously. Work in renewable energy, so nice and positive, all for the future. But yeah, really my passion is more around the creative things, so especially writing. And this is a book that I felt I had to write and own some of my crap I talk about in the book. But yeah, thanks for having me, and yeah, looking forward to this session.
No, I mean, really great to have you here. I just want to, I think like the best way in is a friend of mine who was the literary director at Faber and Faber, so I take it as a good person, said, listen, if you want to judge a book quickly, judge it by the first line and the last line. I have read the book. I'm not one of these people that comes on and pretend I read the book, madly reading it in the bath to make sure I got it done beforehand, and I really enjoyed it. And so let's start with the first line. I think that might be the way that we come in, because I really liked it. So, well, it's actually more than a line. I'm going to start with the first paragraph for it to make sense, really. Looking down, I see a patchwork of pebbles and 4 feet. Luciana is holding me tight from behind. I'm glad of it because there's a clawing chill in the winter air. We're well wrapped up though, so even if she wasn't there, I'd be warm enough, right? And things would be simpler, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
So I really like that because I think it sums up a lot of what the story is about. So maybe you want to tell us more about that.
Yeah, God, and that brings up different feelings, a bit of sadness there at what happened, sort of joy at what happened as well. But yeah, it's about the push-pull that I experience as self-diagnosed avoidant, and I'm tentatively edging into a relationship and closeness with another person and intimacy. Yet there's a part of me which sees that as incredibly dangerous. And it thinks that freedom is independence and freedom is just carrying on my own. And the book is about trying to own that and investigate it. Like, why am I afraid? What am I defending from? Why do I keep pushing people away? Like, this is not what's in this book. It's not like a badge I own. Hey, this is great. This is like, it's not pretty and it's painful. And they're patterns that I want to, say, hey, this is here, I own it, and I want to move past it. But I also think, just from conversations, there's other guys and girls out there that struggle with similar things. So that moment on the beach is about feeling good with someone, yet I'm still not sure. There's a threat here. There's something I can't quite trust.
And I mean, I think that's one of the main reasons that really I kind of invited you here. What we do with the Magnificent Man Project, YouTube channel and specifically within the Facebook group is that we try and share resources that are around masculinity and relate to kind of modern masculinity, and more important than that, ways that we can improve our own experience of living as men, and thus that rippling out through life. And I really think that isolation, and it's not, is it isolation? I'm questioning myself whether that's the right word, but that sort of idea of like, it would be better if I was on my own. It would kind of be better if I don't care. It would be better if I'm kind of if I'm shielded from things. That my life would be simpler, as you say in there. It would be simpler, wouldn't it? I think that's a common experience for a lot of men. Certainly, it's come across my desk in many ways as a way of being for a lot of men, a way of thinking for a lot of men. What do you think of the cost?
Yeah, that's the word I was thinking. Just the word I was thinking. Well, you know, but earlier days, I didn't see a cost. I just felt freedom. I felt, hey, this feels good. I've got my independence back. But now the cost is always, you know, I'm on the beach. I'm always playing about. You know, I'm on the beach in that scene, and I'm literally always playing about, splashing about in the shallows. And the cost is never really getting in the water, going for a good swim and getting some depth. And the cost is having lost many beautiful opportunities for love and connection in my life, and having lost the opportunity to grow and develop through a relationship. So the cost is, you know, on one level, knowing myself better, appreciating myself, but another big cost is not having the opportunity to give and receive love. And you know what's more important? And I'm starting to, you know, realize that love is, you know, I used to think it was this magical feeling, maybe the Disney imprint from a kid, or the perfect one, the perfect beauty. And now I do get that it's a choice. And I also get there's compromises, and there's rough with smooth, but it's one thing to get it in the mind, isn't it? The other thing is, like, there's still these energetic barriers. Sometimes there's still these fears, and this whole book is about, okay, experiencing those, identifying them, so that they don't hold so much power, and then consciously choosing to move past that, because I know there's a cost, and I know actually having a relationship, a huge amount of good can come out of that.
Indeed. Just a reminder to anyone who's watching this live, if you're watching it live, there will be a chance at the end to ask some questions. So stick them in the comments, and I'll deal with those at the end. So maybe now's the time to talk about, before we go to the last line in the book, maybe now's a good time to kind of, what brought this book around? It's your first book. What made it happen?
Yeah, what made it happen? Beginning of lockdown. It was pretty dark and cold in England. Pretty terrified about the next, 4 or 5 or indefinite number of months ahead. And I meet someone in Brighton, and we spark up a relationship very quickly, and end up being together for the whole of this last lockdown. So beginning of November. How did the book come about? Because I started it in November, and it's a bit paradoxical. It was a way to survive. I suddenly started writing. I was in this new relationship. It was intense. I was feeling things. She was really liking me. I was confused. Did I like her? Did I not like her? There's many aspects in the book, not just about emotion, but sex as well, and like what's expected of a man and a woman, and how should sex always feel? I sometimes feel as a man, it's easier for a woman in many ways, in terms of pleasure or being open and vulnerable. And often there's so much expectation on a man. And of course, women have their, the pressures as well. But it was a way to cope. But at the same time, there was an element where I wanted to give the relationship a chance. So I needed to get all this out, try and help myself understand it. I was having therapy at the same time. So that's all documented in the book. Been very open about that. So it was a way to try and understand, but it was a way to also escape. And there's that kind of irony is in the book. I highlight it, but escaping to my mind and escaping to this book meant it was myself, Luciana in the book, and also the book. So there was this like tripartite relationship, and it was quite interesting. When I finally finished the book, we had a period of time where it was a different kind of relationship, because I wasn't writing all the time. I wasn't trying to record everything, and it gave new possibilities. So I recognized it, but it was still something I had to do. I wanted to get this project out. I felt the need to get this message out, even if, you know, girls read this and think, oh my gosh, I'll never have a relationship with this guy. I wasn't doing it to look good. I was doing it because this is where I'm at. It's an honest account, and I do think it will help me move forward, and it will help others move through similar issues.
So what do you think, what do you hope that the reader gets from it?
Well, if they are experiencing, you know, failed relationships or you know, fears to connect and be intimate, that they're not alone. So some solace in that. Some of the techniques I use in the book, whether it's meditations or therapies, that there are routes to use the mind and techniques to reduce the fear, reduce the patterns, but also that if someone acts like this, if someone's pushing away love, they're not a bad person. You know, part of this book is trying to find compassion for myself. Ultimately, you know, I'm not doing it because, you know, I'm some bad guy. I'm just doing it because I've got some stuff going on that I haven't processed perhaps, and I need to look at it, and it's getting in the way, and I'm tired of that. I want a more expansive, more loving life. And so one way was to get it down, document it, own it, and not that, as I said, not let it be this badge. Hey, this is who I am, a guy I can't love. But this is a guy that wants to look at it and knows I can love, but it's a process, you know, or it's a choice. So I want people to feel, yeah, less alone in that there's other guys and girls out there that struggle, and that there are ways to move forward.
Yeah, because what I really liked about the book, and I was really relieved when I started reading it, because I think I said, like, you know, I've read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kind of books around personal development or whatever, and you know, this certainly has an element. You've kind of, there's stuff in there. There are sort of how-to elements to this, and kind of a lot of kind of as you say, there are kind of tools and techniques and all that stuff in there, and there is a sort of journey in there that feels like people could follow if they wanted to, but it feels very much like a novel. You know, it presents itself as a novel, and I found it very refreshing, and also was very relieved that it was well written, because the other one, the one that sprung to mind, which I'd kind of read recently that was like that, was the 5 a.m. Club. I don't know if you've ever read that book, and you know, like, the stuff in there is fascinating, this kind of strategies and all that, but it's probably the single most worst book I've ever read in terms of actual kind of reading it. It's like, the story is terrible, but anyway, I digress. So I really like the fact that it blends those two things, and you kind of relate to it at the end. You say the genre is memoir, self-help, romance, tragicomedy, which I think kind of sums it up quite well.
I mean, it's maybe a defense, but I always like a bit of humor in there. You know, I think we should always be able to laugh at things, and I've tried to do that in there. I think it will help engage, you know, the reader on that journey. But yeah, no, I'd hate for it to be a sort of self-help technique book, because I think, you know, I wouldn't want a plan in there, because, you know, I'm a bit against all this personal development stuff that I was into many years ago, but I don't want anything prescriptive in there. It's literally just my perspective, my journey, but told honestly. And I think just from that standpoint, people, I believe, will get something from it. Ultimately, I think it's a story about moving from a sense of rejection or self-alienation, which I think a huge amount of humans feel on some level, and moving towards self-acceptance. And that's not, a reading a book job or a flick of a switch. ultimately, yeah, it's a decision. Maybe that's a bit idealistic thinking, but I think it has to be a decision because that's how it gives you the power. But yeah, it's not a guide. It's just my story. But I'm glad that you connected with it. You know, that's what I'm after.
Yeah, and actually on the back of it, you say, fate loves irony. I do hope it brings a little solace to those also struggling to let down their guard and trust. I like it's a nice reason to write a book.
And I'd love to hear from people that have classified as maybe attachment issues, avoidance, or anxious, or just struggling with relationships. And I do have a website. It's actually called thestruggletolove.com.
Okay, we'll make sure that goes in all the comments and stuff.
Brilliant. Yeah. So yeah, no, do connect if you want to sort of develop this discussion.
I'm also pleased you wrote the book because you're the second MKP man that I've had on this who's written a book. So like we could change the scrap line, the strap line to taking over the literary world one man at a time, maybe, because it seems like we're putting output out there in the world right now.
What's the key thing in the book that resonated with you most from your own story?
For my own story, I think it's changed. It's changed quite a lot in terms of what I relate to. What I mean by that, I'm not being very clear there. What I mean by that is that I related to a younger self when I read that book. I'm much more open now, and I'm much more, I've got a wife and a son, and I'm committed up. I'm fully committed up, but that sense of I'm better off alone. Some way it's simpler and safer on my own. Was the bit that I really kind of connected with, and actually an example of that it's just reminded me of talking about it then was when my son was born. It took me a while, it took me a while to love him, but I didn't have those people talk about just this wave of raw emotion comes over to you and your brain gets rewired and that's it. You have a sole purpose for life. That didn't come straight away. And I was a bit oh, hang on, what's sort of happening here? And I realized it was kind of that. There was a fear of being attached. There was a fear of being completely attached to this boy that was in the world, because of me. And actually when that finally ended, I remember it was the first day that, my wife had gone back to work, and it was the first day it was just me and him. And I was going to be doing dad for the day, it was the first time me and him alone, and the in-laws had gone away and all of that, and, all of that stuff that's around newborn. And it was just me and him. And I remember I just cried at that moment. And that was when my heart kind of completely opened. And what I realized in that moment was I was terrified. I'd been terrified all along, because what it meant when I opened my heart and really let it all in and let that attachment in was I'm vulnerable now. There is a way that someone can really hurt me now. My own safety is no longer the most important thing in this world. There is a way that incredible pain could come into my life. And, in many ways that kind of happened, years later when I had a son that died. And so I kind of felt that kind of, when that happened, I'd never understood what people meant by my heart broke. In that moment when I went through that, my heart broke. I knew what it meant. It shattered and was never going to be the same again in the same way. But that's the bit that I kind of really related to, was that the fear of that because that's what made me keep it a bit at bay at the beginning. Was I kind of knew that was waiting for me. If I really do that, I'm vulnerable. And what I've learned since then, of course, is that it's all that is doing really is accepting life. You know, the worst thing that can ever happen could just be round the corner, you know, and the worst thing that probably could happen, you know, if it will happen. You know, like if you never get into a relationship with someone in that way, then you're never going to feel all that stuff, and you could die, and I'll die on my own. Like, and that would be terrible. And if I do, then, you know, either I'm going to watch that person die. If I have a lifelong relationship, either I'm going to watch that person die, or they're going to watch me die, or we're going to break up. You know, it's like, doesn't sound very cheerful, but like we're going to experience the terrible things in life at some time. That's the deal. That's the cost. That's the ticket price of being in this fantastic thing called life that has beautiful sunsets and fantastic music and people you love and fantastic food and, like, you know, all of that brilliant stuff. The cost of this experience called life is we're going to have to go through some terrible, terrible, heartbreaking experiences in our life. And it's like the growth for me in all that was, that's what I turned on when I gave up that fear of attachment and gave up the fear of feeling the pain. Was I said yes to life in many ways, because I could experience it all.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, I've gone on a bit of a rant now, but
Good rant.
But that's kind of what that's where I went to when I was reading that book, was that period in my life where I was like, I'm not really sure if I can let people close. I'm easier on my own. That's why I liked that first line. It's simpler on my own. And that's almost a survival instinct, isn't it? Like, I'm faster on my own. I'm in less danger on my own. It's almost a sort of survival instinct. And that's why I think it's really interesting in terms of that. That's something I tend to experience in quite a lot of men. There's almost a survival mode, especially when it comes to emotions.
Yeah, it's like an island. It's like a protected island, but it's, you know, I'm bored of that now. I want something different.
Yeah, indeed. And it's you know, it's great. Let's go to the last line.
Okay.
There's no spoiler alert here because it doesn't give away the story or any of that stuff. So if you're watching at home, don't start cursing me and saying, what's he doing? But it says, I really hope I can find that midway point sometime soon, otherwise known as living. And I think we sort of covered that in many ways. It was why I like that as a last line, is you've come from me of like, that's the story arc in a way. You've come from, I'm going to be better on my own, and you've landed with this is living, this midway point between safety and unsafety, between pleasure and hurt. Is that how you see it? Is that where you were with that?
Yeah, there's a few things in that. Like, I can be very black and white, which is, you know, it's quite limiting. You know, really trying to find the grey, or why not go for multicolor? But I think that line also is about the constant opening and closing of my shield, of my defense, and that's it's a bit of a no man's land. It's also exhausting. It's exhausting for me because it leads to confusion, and it's exhausting for the person trying to love me because they're seeing me and hearing me, and then they're being pushed away, and you know, doesn't work. But it's also about the book, and it was about the fact that I kept opening that book that I was writing to write it, and then I'd close it, and then I'd be in the relationship, and then something would happen, and I'd open that book, and I'd keep writing the book, and it was about, okay, let's put this to rest now. Let's close this book, and let's just be with someone. Let's just ultimately, initially, be with myself. Stop running, but ultimately stop running from someone else. And I know it's a cliche, but you really can't do it until you stop running from yourself. And you talked about fear, and I've been very afraid, and it's taken a while to realize the sort of level of that fear. But yeah, all the patterns are there, they're documented, and I can't escape from that. And that's what I've been doing. I've been avoiding and running, and by putting it out there in the world, I can't hide, you know.
Well, it's certainly out there now.
Yeah. I must admit, it's been a bumpy ride publishing it. You know, I was like, got to do this. I know it's the right thing. Like, this is my story. And then it was terror, abject terror. A couple of days where I was like, some people saying, "Oh, it's very brave," and I was thinking, do they mean I'm a complete fool? And a couple of days where I thought I've made the biggest error of judgment ever, and I'm just going to have to emigrate to, I don't know, off to Thailand or something, and just no one will love me. But then a couple of good reviews started to trickle in, and I was like, some of the things people said, I was like, yes, that's what I wanted to communicate. So yeah, I'm glad I did it, and I'll own, you know, I'm ready for the consequences, you know, good and bad. I'm just hoping it's a lot more good than bad. But it's been trying for some of the relationships in my life, because it's a very personal account. Most of all with the central figure, my girlfriend in there. So it's been a hell of a ride.
And so let me bring to one point. There was one, I think it was 145. There was one page. There was one bit in particular I really liked. 159.
Was your bath still warm at this point?
My bath was still warm at this point. I was that far in. So this was the bath section that I read. This is what I read beforehand. And this bit really kind of stood out for me as a really great bit of writing, and something I think is kind of a common experience for men when I speak to them. And it's the section around sex. So I'm just going to read it out, and it says, "Do you enjoy to have sex with me?" Lucy asks all of a sudden, as we lay on the couch in my attic one evening. Wow, what a question, I think. Of course, but I'm not just in the headspace for it tonight. I'm sorry. It's actually been for the past week, pretty much. I think it has something to do with her leaving for Luton in 2 weeks' time. That, and for the past 20 minutes, a petite French girl I met once at a dance event in Toulouse has been invading my mind. And why I really liked that bit is, I think, especially around relationships, and this like massive generalizations, you know, we have to talk about if we're talking about men or we're talking about masculinity, we're talking about huge generalizations, of course. But there's certainly, I come across time and time again when men are talking about relationships and intimacy more really, that there's often a kind of an invasion of the past in the present, you know. And I know from myself how, like, you know, kind of slight chance encounters for a long time, like it's almost like rumination. It's like, you're like, why is this person, or why is this incident, even though something never happened, in my mind now? I've not thought about this person for so long, and now they're kind of there. And I wonder if it is ruminating, or if it's some sort of is it another sort of defense mechanism of escaping the present? You know, like almost how fear lives in the future, you know, in the future and past. Is it at times of intimacy or times of kind of growing emotional connection? Is it a defense mechanism to go back and think about the past?
Yeah, I mean, it's talked a lot about in the book, and I'd say the conclusion is absolutely it's running away. It's trying to disengage from what is right there, present. The person that's trying to be intimate with you, trying to love you, and you're off in fantasy land. And it's very common for avoidant if we're going to classify it as an avoidant behavior, thinking about an ideal from the past, especially one that you can't now have. But also what's worse is you'll see in the book sometimes it's fantasizing about the future, like a future possibility or an alternative. So it's a double whammy, and there's no place for life there. You're just in the mind, you're not in the present. Of course, these thoughts are all occurring in the present, but you're not really right there with that other human that's trying to share that space with you. And absolutely, it's an escape. But the struggle is, even if you know that, like I do in the book many times, to try and overcome that with some kind of conscious thought or just a self-nurturing, it's not easy, but it has to be attempted. Otherwise, there's no chance of a relationship. And so I just had to be honest about that, because I wonder, how many times, people think all sorts of things when they're with a partner or with someone, and a lot of them you wouldn't dream sharing. And I just felt like I had to get, be the sacrificial lamb in a way, just to get it out there, just to make a few people maybe feel a bit more comfortable. But yeah, it's definitely a risky thing to do, I think. Sure.
Well, thank you for doing it. There was another Peter as well that I just was really, really interesting to me. Where's the part? So there's the bit, it's in the hating yourself thing, where you talk about a friend of yours who kind of seems to have the exact opposite kind of a thing, where he kind of becomes completely committed really kind of quickly, but seems to be coming around to your way of thinking recently. I guess they're two sides of the same coin in a weird kind of way. In one way, for avoidance, you're kind of going, I'm safe because I can keep myself away. And in another way, you're kind of going, I'm safe because I'm going to get, you love me, right? You love me, right? We're committed, right? We're committed, right? It's like that it's real sort of, it's still the same fear in a way, but two ways of dealing with it. But what I was interested in is that a spectrum that you felt in your own life? Like, has there been times when you're really the other way, or is it always a kind of stoic isolation?
Stoic isolation, God, that's nice. Well, it's not nice, but I like how you said it. Interestingly, no, do you know what? I had a real wake up from reading the book Attached by Amir Levine, and that's about attachment theory. So just a theory, but the way that's really aimed at called anxious type. So let's see the spectrum here. We've got secure in the middle, those lucky people that just naturally do well in relationships, naturally form relationships, and they're not threatened by it. You've got avoidant, which, as we've described, all those patterns that push away when you get close. And then on the other end of the spectrum, could be described as a more codependent spectrum. You've got the anxious type, and they need to be in a relationship. They need that security, maybe in an unhealthy way, like the avoidant pushing away. And the very worst combination, apparently, is to have an avoidant and an anxious in a relationship. But the trouble is, in the dating world, they make up a massive proportion of those single, because the secures are already in relationships, so it's tricky. But to answer your question, no, I don't really tread on the anxious side, to be honest. I'm quite strongly on the avoidant, but you can have people that sort of tread in both, like my friend described in the book, and they could be described as anxious avoidant. But you have to treat this carefully. We don't want to box ourselves into terminology. However, I do think there's a great power and liberation in being able to identify something, to be able to name something. And when you name it, you can give yourself a bit of distance. You can go, oh, okay, it's that thing happening. I'm now going to try and choose something different. And that's what a bit of the book's about. It's trying to recognize the patterns and go, hold on a minute, let's try something different. And there's just a struggle of that, it's not easy.
What were those two phrases? So you had an avoidant and a...
So in the middle, we got secure.
Yeah.
And then one end, you got the avoidant. And then the other end, you got the anxious.
Anxious. Okay, great. Where can people keep up to date with, I mean, the book's available on Amazon, right?
Books on Amazon. I've also got a website where I'll post events or, some discussions. People want to get in touch. It's thestruggletolove.com. I might start a podcast around that. So just go to that website for any updates on that. But yeah, thestruggletolove.com. And if they want to get in touch via the website or via yourself, but I'd love anyone watching this, if they're resonating with any of this, they'd love you to get a copy. Bear in mind, get no profits from the book myself, and any profits I do get are going to MKP plus another couple of charities. Also, for every book that's sold, I give a donation to charity as well. Why? Well, animal rescue videos really helped me out in lockdown, got me through it, and also did therapy. So I thought mental health charities or organisations and support groups, and also animal care. So hope that helps as well. You buy the book.
Fantastic. So I'm going to start bringing it to a close now. I do always end with 3 questions. Okay, so we're going to do those 3 questions. Those questions are, first one, what question haven't I asked you that you'd have wished that I did?
Goodness me. Oh, gosh. Nothing comes to mind, honestly, on that one.
I'm getting good at it then. I'm getting good at it. I'm not missing anymore. All right, second one. If you could go back in time and meet yourself as a teenager, what advice would you give yourself? Knowing you probably wouldn't listen, but what advice would you give yourself?
Do you know what? It's not advice. It's quite physical. I want to, grab him by the shoulders, just look in his eyes, or give myself a hug and just tell him to slow down. Just reassure him that it's okay. You don't have to keep running. So, it's a sort of grounding, physical reassurance that, hey, you're okay.
It's interesting because that when I asked that question, that, in life, it's kind of what people often say, oh, I wish I could go back knowing what I knew now, But actually, when I asked that question, and maybe it's just the sort of men that come through what I'm doing here, is it will often come down to, I'd just like to tell them that they're okay.
I'd say you're okay, and also buy some Bitcoin.
Yeah, buy some Bitcoin. If ever you see anything by Banksy early on, just buy them. Yeah. And there's a few fashions to avoid as well. Let's get them there. And the other one is, final question then, what book has had the most impact on your life?
Oh, goodness, great questions. Do you know what? I think there's quite a few books I've looked. I think probably science fiction books, even though I'm not a science fiction geek, but Ian M. Banks books, just the expansiveness of the worlds he creates. And even though it's completely alien, it's completely human at the same time. So that did a lot for sort of expanding mind and imagination. But my very favorite book is Stone Junction.
Yeah. I'm reading it. I'm reading it at the moment.
No way. Okay.
One of the people who's watching now, just looked down, who's watching, Patrick Seymour, bought me it for my birthday, and I'm reading it at the moment. Yeah, it's a really, really, really good book. It's a great book.
Garp, The World According to Garp, because I didn't start reading till I was about 17, and that was one of my first books, The World According to Garp. That was quite powerful as well.
That's Irvin.
Irvin something, yeah.
Yeah, Irvin someone. Yeah, I have read that book.
Funny how we changed though, because I would have said, like years ago, I would have said, oh, The Alchemist by Paolo, and now if I read that, I'll be like, oh, this is nonsense.
Yeah, next time it'll be Playboy. Playboy is my Okay, so Samuel, thank you so much for coming into Magnificent Man Project Group and recording this for us and being here with me on Thursday for knowledge. Or anyone watching, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please do remember to subscribe. And I'll see you all next week. And Samuel, hopefully I'll see you again very soon.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks again to Samuel Morgan for coming in and talking to us about his book Postponement. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, subscribe and click the bell so you know when we've recorded something new. And also, why don't you put in the comments what you enjoyed most about this week's episode? See you next Thursday if you're thirsty for knowledge. Take care. Thank you.